Hello friends, followers and channel members, welcome back to the channel here in Microsoft Flight Sim 2024, and today's video is a little bit different in that it's not just for you guys to watch, but it's also for me. You see, tomorrow I'm very excited because after a brief period away, I'm looking forward to actually getting back to flying in real life. Now, it has been a few months since I managed to take to the skies, and that's just because life has gotten in the way, but as I have had a few months off and we're getting back into the skies for real tomorrow, I thought I probably should jump into the sim and just refresh a few things and flows. And what better thing to do than also share those with you? So if you wanted to practice your circuit training, you could do it as it is done by me anyway, here in the real world. Now, this isn't going to be a long, complicated video. It literally is going to be me flying the circuit and mentally going through everything that I need to do whilst we're doing it. Huge caveat though before we get started, the default Cessna 152 in Microsoft Flight Sim 24 is insanely overpowered. Nothing happens this fast in a 50-year-old Cessna, so do bring that to mind when you're trying this in your home sim. Alright, so disclaimers out the way, let's get going. Okay, on the ground then, before all the pre-flight checks, which are done with a checklist. Before the takeoff roll commences, just double check we need to make sure the fuel mixture is rich. We've got 10 degrees of flap set, and that as we start the takeoff roll, we have a little bit of back pressure on that yoke just to keep the weight off the nose, and at 50 knots that is when we are going to rotate. As soon as we feel that lift up, we actually lower the nose a little bit to help with that ground effect, just to let the aircraft gain speed before starting the full climb, and we're going to climb out at around about 65 knots. And it always feels a little bit counterintuitive to, once you feel that aircraft lift off, just push the nose down a bit so you're almost flying level, and that lets the aircraft gain the speed that it needs before finally pulling away into the full climb. The next trigger then is around 300 feet. That is the point when we're going to put the flaps up, so we've got a clean configured aircraft. Next then, at 500 feet, we can begin the crosswind turn. Now this is basically turning the aircraft 90 degrees to the left or right, depending on which way your circuit is. And as we're cleanly configured with no flaps, you can make this bank at a maximum of 30 degrees. The next step then is to level off at the airfield circuit height, which for my airfield where I fly is 800 feet. Now at this point, we reduce the power and set 2300 RPM and trim for level flight. Now, Microsoft Flight Simulator, because this is overpowered, 2300 RPM might be a little bit too quick, so you probably want to just ease back on that a little. Next then, when you can see the airfield over your left or right shoulder, it's time to turn downwind. And this section is the one I always find not stressful, but there's lots to do in it, and you want to get it done out the way as quick as you can. The first thing I need to do is to make a radio call. Golf Echo Juliet is downwind, runway 24 to land. Next then, we do the bump finch check, which means brakes, we press them, make sure they feel normal. Next is the undercarriage, we're fixed wing, so that doesn't matter in this aircraft. Next is the mixture, need to make sure that's fully rich, as we might have pulled that out if we'd been on a cruise. Next, a quick check of our fuel and make sure that the flaps are up. We also want to look at the instruments, make sure the gyro instrument is showing the same as our actual compass, and we also then want to make sure the carb heat is on, that is pulling it out. Now that is obviously a lot to do all whilst you're flying straight and level and keeping the airfield in sight out to your left or right, making sure that you're aware of your position relative to your airfield. And believe me, it is much easier to do this in real life than it is here in the flight simulator. Next thing to do then is the base turn, when the airfield is again 45 degrees behind you over your left or right shoulder, depending on your circuit direction. And then when you're on the base leg, we're going to reduce the power down to 1500 RPM and keep the nose up. That allows the speed to bleed off, and then when it's safe and the speed is within the white band, we are going to set flaps to 20. You're then going to hold the speed at 60 knots, and the aircraft at this point then should start to descend. Now if you need to push the nose down to increase your speed up to 60 knots, then add in a little bit of power as well to halt the descent. The next move then is the turn on to final to align yourself up with your landing runway. Once you're on final, just the same as we do in the A320, in that we want to get the checklists out of the way so we can concentrate on flying. When we're on final, make the ATC call Golf Echo Juliet on finals runway 24. Following that, select flaps full. Now you're free to concentrate on aiming for your touchdown zone. Again, Again, keeping the speed of around 55-60 knots, using pitch to help control that and adding in the power if you feel yourself getting too low. The next step then is knowing when safely to close the throttle, basically when you know that you are going to clear the hedge before the runway. And remember that it is not an airliner. You are going to have to put the nose down so you can actually see where you're going. The approach should almost be a nose down approach a little bit, so you've got a clear view out of the window, and then you obviously want to pull back in the flare when you're touching down. When you are ready to cut the power, you're obviously going to close that, and you need to turn the carb heat off as well. At this point then, you're just a glider, aiming for a softer touchdown as possible, and you might even hear the stall warning horn go off just before touchdown. If you do, then that's absolutely fine. If you're then going to go around again for another go, once you've pulled off the active, obviously make sure you make the ATC call, let them know the runway is clear. You then need to put the flaps back to 10, put the mixture back in, make sure the carb is off, and reset the trim to take off. And that's it, short and sweet. A great little refresher for me. Looking forward to flying again tomorrow, and of course hopefully you can use some of this as well if you're flying around in flight sim, just to try and get through some of those flows as they are done in real life. I know loads of real life commercial pilots that really miss general aviation flying, low level, out of the window, and just the freedom that that gives you, rather than 36,000 feet with the autopilot on for several hours. If you have found this video useful, then please do share it, give it a like, and of course if you're not yet a subscriber, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to see you all in our next one. Bye bye for now.